The banquet hall was loud enough to drown a scream. Laughter clashed against stone walls carved with old victories. Goblets struck together in careless celebration, and music echoed beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed far more blood than joy. The northern court always celebrated loudly, as if noise itself could convince the world they were not afraid, stood at the edge of it all, not seated among the favored families, not close enough to the high table to matter, but not so far that she could disappear either. Exactly where unwanted brides were placed, visible but forgettable. She had been sent to the north as an obligation. Her family had called it an honor. The court called it tradition. In truth, it was a transaction wrapped in silk and expectation. She had been offered as a potential bride, not because she was desired, but because she was available. Her bloodline was old enough to be useful, weak enough to be ignored. Tonight's banquet was meant to introduce her to the court. Tomorrow would decide her fate. She wore a simple gown compared to the others, dark blue, modestly embroidered, chosen not to attract attention but to avoid insult. Her hair was braided and pinned low, her posture careful, her expression calm. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than hope around her. Noblewomen laughed too loudly, their glances sharp as knives. Men boasted of hunts and wars, of beasts slain and borders secured. Every conversation felt like a test she had not studied for. And then she noticed him. He sat alone near the far wall, half-shadowed by a column carved with ancient runes. His cloak was dark and heavy, the hood pulled low over his face. He held a cup loosely in one hand, untouched, while the other rested on the table as if grounding him there. Someone laughed nearby. A drunk. A nobleman sneered, not bothering to lower his voice. Always lurking at feasts like this. Another added, "They say he only comes for the wine. Doesn't speak, doesn't bow, doesn't belong," a woman concluded. She followed their gazes again. There was something wrong with the way he sat. Too still, too controlled. Drunks slouched, leaned, swayed. This man did none of that. He was silent, yes, but not careless. His stillness felt deliberate, contained, dangerously. So her attention lingered longer than she meant it. 2. When his head tilted slightly, just enough, she felt it. Eyes sharp, focused, briefly, locking onto hers before looking away again, as if acknowledging her presence without inviting it. Her breath caught. She looked down at her plate, suddenly aware of her own heartbeat. Ignore him, she told herself. This court eats kindness alive. Yet as the night stretched on, the noise began to press against her skull. The wine flowed. Laughter turned cruel. Jests sharpened into mockery. The hooded man became the target. A goblet was pushed toward him by a laughing lord. "Drink, stranger. Or is the wine too good for you?" No response, not another voice followed, louder. "Careful. He might curse the cup." Laughter erupted. She flinched. The hooded man did not react. He did not raise his head, did not tense, did not move. He simply sat there, absorbing the cruelty like stone absorbs rain. Something twisted painfully in her chest. She knew this feeling. Being spoken around, not to. Being reduced to rumor, to assumption, to something less than human. Her fingers curled around her own goblet. "Don't," she warned herself. "Don't draw attention." But kindness, she had learned, was not something that could be reasoned with. It rose like breath when you were drowning. She stood. The movement alone drew a few glances. A woman standing without invitation always did. She crossed the hall slowly, each step measured. Her pulse hammered in her ears. By the time she reached him, the noise of the banquet felt distant. As if she had stepped into another world, she stopped beside his table. Up close, she could see more. The faint lines of old scars at his wrists, half hidden by his sleeves. The subtle way his shoulders bore tension, like someone constantly holding something back. She placed her goblet on the table in front of him. "You look like you could use water," she said. Softly. The words felt small in the vast hall, but they landed. The hooded man stilled completely. Slowly, he lifted his head. The shadows shifted, revealing just enough. The lower half of his face hidden by darkness, the upper part still concealed beneath the hood. His eyes met hers, and this time he did not look away. They were not unfocused. They were clear, alert, cold as winter iron. "You shouldn't do that," he said quietly. His voice was low, steady and entirely sober. A ripple passed through her. "I'm sorry," she replied, instinctively lowering her tone. "I didn't mean to offend." "You didn't," he said. "But kindness is noticed here." Her lips curved in a faint, sad smile. "So is cruelty." Something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something closer to recognition. He glanced at the goblet. "Why?" The question was simple, and heavy. She hesitated only a second. "Because no one else did." The silence between them deepened. Around them, the banquet continued, oblivious. Music swelled. Laughter rang. But at this small table, something fragile and dangerous took shape. He studied her face as if searching for deception. Finding none, he reached for the goblet. Their fingers brushed. The contact sent a sharp, unseen pulse through the air, not visible but felt. The candles nearest them flickered violently before settling. She gasped softly. He withdrew his hand at once. "You should go," he said, more urgently now. Her heart raced. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," he replied. "You did something right. And this court punishes that." She swallowed. "Then thank you for the warning," she said quietly. "And for listening." She turned to leave. Before she could take more than a step, his voice followed her. "What is your name?" She paused. Names were power here. They were invitations, claims. Still, she answered. She gave him her name. He repeated it under his breath, as if tasting it. "Be careful tomorrow," he said. She turned back, confusion tightening her chest. "Tomorrow? The choosing," he replied. "The court will decide what to do with you." Her fingers clenched at her sides. "And if they don't?" His gaze held hers, unwavering. "Then leave. Do not wait for mercy from people who mistake silence for obedience." She studied him. Truly studied him. The hood, the stillness, the restraint that felt like a storm bound in chains. "And you?" she asked softly. "Will you leave too?" For the first time, his composure cracked. Just slightly. "I cannot," he said. She nodded, though she didn't fully understand. As she returned to her place at the edge of the hall, whispers followed her like shadows. Foolish, desperate, naive. She ignored them, because something far more unsettling had settled in her bones. The hooded man had not looked at her like a drunk. He had looked at her like a reckoning. And somewhere deep beneath the castle, ancient magic, long dormant, stirred in response to a single quiet act of kindness. By midnight, the banquet had changed its shape. What began as celebration became performance. People drinking not because they were thirsty, but because intoxication made cruelty feel like entertainment. The musicians played faster to match the heat of the room. Torches burned brighter, throwing long shadows across the pillars. Every shadow looked like it was listening. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, trying to become invisible again. But invisibility was no longer possible. She had crossed the hall. She had offered water to the hooded man. She had spoken to the one person the court enjoyed pretending wasn't real. Now eyes kept drifting toward her quick, assessing glances that slid away before she could meet them. Like she had become a mistake the room didn't know how to correct. Across the hall, the hooded man hadn't moved from his seat. He held the goblet she'd offered, but he still didn't drink. He remained still, too still, like someone trained to endure. And every time laughter rose too high, or a noble's voice sharpened into mockery, she felt his attention shift without him turning his head. As if he could hear the world's cruelty, the way wolves heard a heartbeat under snow. She tried to focus on the conversations at her table. A lord spoke about border skirmishes. A lady laughed about a rival's dress. Someone bragged about a hunting wolf they'd tamed by starving it into obedience. The word obedience made her throat tighten. Tomorrow was the choosing. Tomorrow. A man might stand before the altar and decide her future with a single gesture. Tomorrow she might be claimed by someone who wanted her bloodline, her silence, her body, her compliance. Or she might be left unchosen, discarded, repackaged into another transaction. She had been told her entire life that she should be grateful. Grateful to be considered. Grateful to be useful. Grateful for any man's interest. Because women were not born to choose. Women were born to be chosen. She stared at the candle flame until it blurred. Leave. The hooded man had warned her earlier. Do not wait for mercy. But where would she go? She had no escort. No money. No safe road back south. The northern wilderness swallowed travelers whole. Wolves weren't the worst thing out there. A laugh erupted louder than the rest. She looked up. A group of noblemen had gathered nearer to the hooded man's table, as if drawn by the same instinct that drove wolves to circle a wounded animal. One of them, broad-shouldered, flushed with wine, leaned forward and planted both hands on the hooded man's table. Still hiding your face? He taunted. Afraid we'll see you cry. The hooded man didn't respond. Another nobleman snorted. He can't cry. Only monsters cry when they remember their monsters. Laughter roared. Her stomach turned. The hooded man's fingers tightened slightly around the goblet. That was the only sign. The broad-shouldered lord grabbed the goblet from his hand and raised it high. A toast, he shouted, to the hooded drunk who thinks he can sit among us. More laughter. More cheers. The hooded man didn't reach for the goblet. He didn't fight. He didn't even look up. That made the cruelty worse, because it wasn't conflict. It was humiliation. And suddenly, she understood. They weren't mocking him because he was weak. They were mocking him because he was restrained. They were testing the boundaries of something they feared. Her hands clenched beneath the table. The high table remained still. No one intervened. No priest spoke. No guard stepped forward. Approval, disguised as silence. The broad-shouldered lord tilted the goblet toward the hooded man's hood. Drink, he demanded, or crawl out the way you came in. The hooded man's voice was quiet. Put it down. The room stilled at the sound, not because it was loud, but because it was unmistakably commanded. The broad-shouldered lord laughed again, though his eyes darted. Or what? The hooded man lifted his head slightly, not enough to reveal his face, enough to let the candlelight catch the edges of his hood, the sharp line of his jaw, the cold control in his posture. Or you will learn, the hooded man said, why I choose silence. A hush spread outward like ripples on water. For a breath, no one laughed. Then someone snickered, uncertain, forcing it. Threats from a drunk. How terrifying. The broad-shouldered lord leaned closer, emboldened by the fragile laughter. What are you going to do? Curse me? The hooded man said nothing, and that absence, the refusal to engage, made the lord angrier. People hated what they couldn't control. He slammed the goblet down, wine splashing across the table. You think you're better than us? The hooded man's voice remained calm. I think you are drunk. Gasps and laughter collided. Humiliation turned its head briefly toward the lord. The lord's face reddened. He drew a dagger, not fully, just enough to make the gesture clear. A threat disguised as bravado. Guards shifted. Priests tensed. The hall held its breath. And still, the hooded man didn't move. That was when she stood. The motion was simple, but it cut through the tension like a bell. Heads turned. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She walked, not rushing, not panicking, across the hall again. Toward the circle of men. Toward the danger. Someone hissed her name, like a warning. She ignored it. She stepped between the broad-shouldered lord and the hooded man's table. The lord stared at her, surprised, then amused. You again. She kept her voice steady. You're embarrassing yourself. The words landed like a slap. A shocked silence rippled through the nobles. Women didn't speak like that to men in the north. Not at banquets. Not without permission. Not without consequences. The lord's smile sharpened. Careful, little bride. Tomorrow you might need someone's mercy. She held his gaze. Then I won't be chosen by a man who needs wine to feel powerful. A collective inhale. The hooded man's attention fixed on her quiet, intense. The lord's expression twisted into anger. You don't know your place. She smiled, faintly sad, tired. I've known my place my whole life. That's why I recognize yours. A flicker of laughter, nervous, scattered, rose from somewhere. Quickly smothered. The lord's hand tightened on the dagger. And for the first time, the hooded man shifted. Not in panic. In decision. His chair scraped softly against the stone floor as he rose. The hall froze. It was astonishing how much space his presence claimed without him. Raising his voice, he stood tall, taller than most of the men around him, and still as a statue carved from winter. The broad-shouldered lord swallowed. Oh, the drunk stands. The hooded man ignored him. He looked at her instead. For a moment she felt as if the entire hall vanished, as if there were only his eyes and the steady line of his posture, and the unspoken question. Why would you step into this? Her throat tightened. She didn't know how to answer. So she didn't. She simply stood, her ground. The hooded man turned his gaze back to the lord. You drew steel at my table, he said quietly. The lord scoffed, though his bravado thinned. So what? You're nobody. The hooded man's voice did not change. Put it away. The dagger trembled slightly, not in the lord's hand around it. The candle flames nearest them bent, pulling toward the hooded man as if he were a gravity they couldn't resist. She felt the air vibrate subtle, like the moment before thunder breaks. The priests stiffened. Several nobles paled. The lord noticed. Too late. His face went pale as he tried to laugh it off. Tricks. The hooded man stepped forward once. The stone beneath his boots hummed. A faint ring of blue-white light pulsed in the floor runic. Ancient, not meant for court entertainment. The symbols were older than the castle itself, older than the titles these men used like armor. The lord's dagger slipped from his fingers and clattered to the ground. A collective gasp erupted. The hooded man didn't. Look at the dagger. He looked at the lord. This is your last. Warning, he said. The lord's mouth opened, but no sound came out, because for the first time in the banquet hall, The court remembered what fear truly felt like. The hooded man's gaze shifted to the surrounding nobles. "You enjoy stories," he said calmly. "So you invented one about me. Drunk, stranger, nobody." Silence. His voice lowered further, a controlled blade. "I let you, because it kept you from noticing what you were truly mocking." He lifted one gloved hand and touched the edge of his hood. The motion was slow, deliberate, and the hall reacted before he even revealed anything. Guards straightening, priests stepping back, nobles leaning away as if distance could protect them. Her breath caught. Then the hooded king removed his mask. It was happening. Not tomorrow. Not in a ceremony. Here. At the feast. Hood fell back first, revealing dark hair, damp with melted snow or sweat she couldn't tell. Candlelight caught on the sharp line of his cheekbones, the controlled tension in his jaw. Then his gloved fingers slid to the mask beneath. For a heartbeat, he paused, and she understood. This was not a dramatic reveal for power. This was a choice that cost him something. When the mask came away, the hall went deathly silent. His face was not monstrous. It was impossibly human strong, scarred by old magic and faint silver fractures across his skin, like moonlight trapped beneath flesh. His eyes were storm grey and mercilessly awake. A noblewoman choked on her wine. Someone whispered, not loud enough to be disrespect, just loud enough to be heard. "Your Majesty." The title fell like a confession. The broad-shouldered lord went white. He dropped to his knees so fast it looked like the floor pulled him down. The priests bowed. The guards lowered their eyes. The room moments ago full of laughter became a grave. The man they had mocked looked down at the kneeling lord and spoke with quiet finality. "You threaten my guest," he said. "Guest. Not servant. Not distraction. Guest. Then his gaze shifted to her, softening by a degree so small only she could notice. "You offered kindness in a room that feeds on cruelty," he said quietly. "That is not weakness." Her throat tightened so sharply she could barely breathe. He turned back to the hall. "And tomorrow," he continued, voice carrying now, "this court will not decide her fate." A tremor ran through the nobles. He stepped closer to her, not touching yet, stopping just short, leaving choice intact. His eyes locked onto hers. "And neither will she," he said. "Not unless she wishes it." The room held its breath. Every noble waited for the next words like a verdict. And then he said it calm, inevitable, terrifying. "I will speak with her privately." The high priest's voice trembled. "Your Majesty, the choosing, the king cut in, calm as winter, is a ritual." His gaze sharpened. "Choice," he said, "is older than ritual." Then he turned, and without taking her hand, without forcing contact, he nodded once toward the doors. An invitation. Her heart pounded. If she followed him, she would be stepping out of the court's control and into something far more dangerous. The attention of a man powerful enough to silence the room with a single breath. The man everyone feared. The man who had just removed his hood and mask for the first time in years. Because she offered him kindness, she swallowed and took one step after him. Behind them, the banquet hall remained frozen silent, stunned, and full of people who suddenly realized they had been laughing at a king, and that the king had noticed. The corridor beyond the banquet hall was colder than the feast itself. Not because the torches were fewer, there were plenty, set in iron brackets along the stone walls, but because the air carried a different kind of silence. A listening silence, as if the castle had stopped performing and started revealing what it truly Was Dot she followed him at a careful distance. Not because she feared he would hurt her, though she had every reason to, but because she didn't know the rules of this new moment yet. The court had rules. Cruel, rigid, predictable rules. But what did a king do when he stepped out of the hall and into shadow? He did not speak. He walked with the steady certainty of someone who had moved through these corridors long before anyone had dared to laugh at him. His armor did not clink. His steps did not hurry. He was a storm that didn't need to prove it could rain. Her heartbeat thudded against her ribs. Behind them, the banquet remained frozen in shock, but she could still feel the weight of it. Hundreds of eyes burning into her back, already rewriting her name into gossip. The desperate. Bride who chased power. The foolish. Girl who got herself cursed. The girl who will die in the king's shadow. She swallowed the bitter taste of those imagined whispers. The king turned at the end of the corridor and pushed open a door carved with runes. The symbols were old and deep, filled with faint silver-like scars in the wood. He stepped inside. She hesitated. He looked back at her, expression unreadable in the torchlight, and spoke quietly. "You can stop here." The words stunned her. A king giving her the option to refuse. To choose. Her fingers tightened into her skirt. "If I stop here," she asked carefully, "what happens?" His gaze held hers. "The court will decide for you." Her throat tightened. "And if I enter?" She whispered. His voice lowered by a fraction. "Then you decide." That was the only answer she needed. She stepped into the room. The door closed behind her with a heavy finality. For a heartbeat, she thought she might have stepped into a trap. But the chamber was not luxurious, not romantic, not like the gilded rooms nobles used to seduce or bargain. It was a war room. Maps on the walls, blades mounted above the hearth, a long table scattered with reports sealed in black wax, and at the far end, embedded in the stone floor, an enormous circle of runes. The runes glowed faintly, like coals under ash. Her breath caught. "You brought me here," she said slowly. "To a warded room." "Yes," he replied. "Because—" His jaw tightened. "Because my presence makes things wake." She stared at him, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're not a drunk." A faint, humorless curve touched his mouth. "No. You're not a stranger either." He looked at her for a long moment, then said something that made her blood run cold. "I have been made a stranger on purpose." Her pulse hammered. He walked to the hearth, not to warm himself, but to create distance, like he feared being too near her. He placed his mask on the mantel. The gesture was quiet, almost ceremonial. Seeing his face fully now without hood, without iron, was unsettling. In a different way, he was human. And the human part was what frightened her most, because monsters could be hated easily, but a human king with scars of old magic and eyes like storm clouds, that was harder to categorize, harder to dismiss, harder to protect herself from. "What are you?" she asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "Why did you defend me?" The question hit her like a blade. She blinked. "Because they were wrong." "That's not an answer," he said, voice calm but precise. She swallowed. "Because I know what it feels like to be laughed at when you can't fight back." His gaze sharpened. "They believed you were harmless," she continued, voice gaining steadiness. "And they enjoyed that. They enjoyed humiliating you because it cost them nothing." A pause. Then his voice dropped. "It costs." She felt her stomach twist. "What does it cost?" He stepped closer, not abruptly, not threateningly, but with the measured movement of someone approaching the edge of something. Dangerous. Truth, he said. The runes in the floor pulsed. Softly. A low vibration filled the room like a heartbeat. She held her breath. Tell me. His eyes flicked to the runic circle. That circle, he said, is older than this castle. Older than the court. Older than the titles they used tonight to kneel. Her throat tightened. What is it? A covenant, he replied. A binding. She looked at the glowing symbols and felt an inexplicable pressure against her skin. Like invisible fingers brushing her wrists, her throat, her ribs, as if the room itself was aware of her presence. What does it bind? She asked. His voice was quiet. Me. The words sank into her bones. Your caste, she whispered. He didn't deny it. I was, he corrected. I am. She took a shallow breath. Why do they fear you so much? His jaw flexed as if he disliked the answer. Because when I was crowned, he said, the land rejected the court. She frowned. That makes no sense. It does if you understand the North, he replied. The North does not obey crowns. It obeys balance. He watched her carefully, as if measuring how much she could carry. Once, he continued, the covenant demanded two. A king and a queen. Not for romance. For restraint. For stability. For the land to remain calm. She swallowed hard. And now? Now, he said quietly, there is only one. Her heartbeat stuttered. So the land pulls, he finished. Whispers, hungers. It tries to make me what the court calls me. She stared. A monster. His eyes hardened, and his voice stayed controlled. Yes. The runes brightened. A sharp chill swept through the room. She fought the instinct to step back, forcing herself to remain still. You sat at the banquet pretending to be nothing, she whispered. I sat there, he replied. Because if they believe I'm weak, they stop trying to control me through fear. That's ridiculous, she breathed. You could have ended their mockery instantly. His gaze flicked to her face with something almost like pain. I did, he said. And you saw what it did to the room. She remembered the moment the titles fell out of their mouths like prayers. The instant the laughter died. The way the entire hall became a grave. Yes, she whispered. He stepped closer again, stopping just short of invading her space. And now, he said, voice low, you must understand something. Her throat tightened. What? The court will not forgive what you did, he said. They will assume you were chasing power. She swallowed. I wasn't. I know, he said. And his certainty in that simple sentence unsettled her more than fear. That they won't care. She forced herself to speak. Then why did you take me out of the hall? Why not let them decide whatever they wanted? His gaze held hers. Because they were about to decide. You were disposable, he said. Words struck her like a blow. Disposable. She had spent her life being treated like that without anyone daring to name it. And I don't allow disposability in my presence, he continued quietly. Not anymore. A silence fell. Her voice trembled. So what do you allow? He exhaled slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. I allow choice, he said. Because choice is the only thing the covenant respects. She stared at him, breath shallow. The covenant respects choice. Yes, he said. The court tried to force brides on me before. Women offered like tribute. Her stomach churned. What happened to them? His jaw tightened. They fled, he said. Or broke. Her throat tightened painfully. And some, he paused, eyes darkening. Some were punished by the court afterward for failing to tame me. She felt nausea rise. How many? She whispered. Enough, he said quietly. That I stopped letting them send anyone at all. Her breath shook. That's why you stayed hidden. Yes, he replied. I became a rumor, a joke, a hooded drunk because it was safer for everyone that way. She stared at him, heart hammering. Then why tonight? Why reveal yourself now? A pause. His eyes locked onto hers with a frightening intensity. Because you offered kindness without knowing who I was, he said. Room seemed to still around those words. You didn't offer it for advantage, he continued. You didn't offer it for survival. You offered it because you saw a person and decided that was enough to deserve mercy. Her throat tightened. And when you touched my hand, he added, voice lower. The covenant reacted. Her skin prickled. The runes in the banquet hall, she whispered. Yes, he said. They recognize something that has not happened in a long time. Her voice barely worked. What? He held her gaze. An anchor, he said. The word echoed inside her like a bell. She swallowed. Anchor for what? His eyes flicked to the runic circle. For the curse, he said. For the land. Her mouth went dry. You mean? Her voice shook. A queen. His expression didn't soften, but his tone stayed careful, controlled. I mean a balance, he said. The court calls it a bride. The land calls it a bond. Her heartbeat thundered. The realization pressed down on her chest heavy, terrifying, inevitable. If the covenant demanded two, then her kindness wasn't just kindness. It was a key. And the king hadn't brought her here to charm her. He had brought her here to warn her. Her voice came out small. You're saying, if I stay near you, you will be pulled into the covenant, he said. And if I don't, she whispered. His jaw tightened again. Then the court will offer you to someone else, he said. Or punish you for being noticed by me. Her skin turned cold. She stared at him, trying to breathe through the fear. And what do you want? She forced out. The question hung between them, raw and dangerous. His gaze did not waver. I want you to survive, he said. Not I want you. Not I claim. You. Survive. Her throat tightened. Painfully. That's not what the court wants. She whispered. No, he agreed. It isn't. She looked at the runes again. The circle pulsed softly, as if listening. A faint whisper brushed her mind. Not a voice, but a sensation. Like wolves circling. Like the land recognizing her name. She shivered. The king noticed. He took a careful step back, as if giving her space was the only form of tenderness he trusted himself to offer. You can leave, he said again. Right now. I will have you escorted safely out of the castle before dawn. Her heartbeat raced. It was the smartest option. The safest option. And yet, she thought of the banquet hall's laughter. The way cruelty became entertainment. The way her entire life had been. Shaped by people deciding what she deserved without asking. What she wanted. She lifted her gaze to him. If I leave, she said softly, they'll still decide for me. Just somewhere else. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he recognized her steel. And if I stay, she continued, voice steadier, I'm stepping into a covenant I don't understand. Beside a king everyone fears. A pause. Then she asked the only question that mattered. If I stay, will you force me? The king's jaw tightened. No, he said, immediate, absolute. Never. She held his gaze. Will you demand obedience? No. Will you use me as a tool to control your curse? He stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I will not chain you." The runes pulsed brighter. As if the covenant approved the words. Her breath caught. She stepped forward, not into him. Not close enough to touch, just enough to show intention. "Then I will decide," she said. His eyes sharpened. "Decide what?" She swallowed. Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. "That I won't be traded tomorrow," she said. "That I won't be discarded. That if the court tries to make me a pawn." She paused, then finished softly. "I would rather stand beside the danger than kneel before the cruelty." A silence fell that felt like the entire keep exhaling. The runic circle flared steady this time. Not violent. The hearth flames bent toward them. The king's expression did not change much, but something in his eyes shifted, something like relief, and something like fear. He spoke carefully, like each word mattered. "Then the arranged marriage will be announced at dawn," he said. Her heart kicked hard. "And the court will come for you," he added. "They will call you reckless. They will call you greedy. They will call you cursed." She took a steady breath. "Let them." The king's gaze locked onto hers. A slow, controlled nod. Then, quietly, "You will be protected." Her throat tightened. "By you?" "By the land," he corrected. "And by me." A low howl echoed from somewhere outside the keep. One wolf. Then another. Then many. Harmonizing like an ancient oath being. Answered. She shivered. Not from cold, from inevitability. King turned toward the door. "Come," he said. She followed. Not because she was commanded. Because she chose. And as they stepped into the corridor, she realized the truth that would reshape everything. Her kindness had not merely revealed the king behind the hood. It had awakened an old covenant that had been waiting centuries for a woman, brave enough to choose the darkness without being consumed by it. And now, the dawn was coming. And with it, a marriage the court did not control. A bond the land demanded. And a king who had finally removed his mask only to place his fate in her hands.